Broadcasting from Orchard Park, New York,
and Boca Raton, Florida,
it's the Freight 360 podcast. From freight broker sales tips to sports talk, this podcast is all about helping you grow as a freight broker. We're your hosts, Nate Cross
and Benjamin Kowalski.
Let's talk freight. All right, welcome back for another episode of the Freight 360 podcast. Today's a good one. We're going to be talking about, well, actually, they're all good, but this one is going to be all about pricing a lane. It's one of the fun things you'll get to do once you have gotten a customer to give you the time of day, and they're going to ask you to quote some stuff out for them. But first, if you are brand new, and I know a lot of you are every week, we've got new listeners, go to freight360.net, check out every other blog, podcast, YouTube video in our collection there. The whole library is searchable on the website. Leave us a comment. We answer a lot of comments from the YouTube channel and questions that come through our Contact Us form on our Tuesday show, The Final Mile, and share us with all of your friends. It helps us grow and get the good word out there to other folks in brokerage. And if you want to learn more about us, you can check out the Freight Broker Basics course. That's a full-length, self-paced course that'll help you learn how to get your brokerage off the ground and everything in order from getting customers, building a carrier network, and growing the business. Ben, what's happening, man? How's Florida?
Not bad, man. Been a little under the weather this week, but hanging in there. I'm actually kind of anxious, and I know it's probably not the thing you're most excited to talk about today, but I watched most of the game Sunday, except, and you'll chuckle at this, like I fell asleep in between, like I had to be like 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game. The Bills had the ball, and I nodded out and woke up, and
the game was over.
Had it, and the time ran out, and I went, "What happened?" I'm like, I literally didn't know what happened. I still didn't know exactly what happened. I think there was a missed field goal, and again, I don't want to jump to the conclusion, but I genuinely don't know how that played out.
Yeah, and so I was at the game. It was a missed field goal, and I'll talk you through it briefly. The Bills, the first half of that game were the more dominant. We went into halftime with I think it was a 3-point lead. I think it was 17-14, and came out, and it was kind of like a back and forth shootout. From that
great
point
game.
On.
It's one of the best games I've watched in a long time.
So pretty much everyone was saying like, whoever has the ball last in this game is going to be the winner because they're going to score last. Like that's how it's going to work. And actually, ironically, that's not what happened. Kansas City was able to kneel it out. Because there was a couple of weird things. So the Bills had this really strange fourth down attempt. They're at their own 30, and I didn't even watch the play because I was like, "Oh, we're punting it." And apparently, Damar Hamlin tried to go 4th and 3 from our own 30 and didn't convert. So that led to a turnover. But luckily, I'm pretty sure it was the same drive. The Chiefs get down just short of the end zone. Fumble the ball into the end zone, which the result of that, my rule is a touchback for Buffalo. So Buffalo got out of a stupid mistake. So then we're getting towards the end of the game. Kansas City is, Buffalo was up by 4. Kansas City drove down and scored to be up by 3. Buffalo drives down and a couple of drop balls and missed reads, leaves them at 4th down, and they're in field goal range. It was like a 40-yard field goal, and the kicker just wide right. And dude, so anyone who knows Buffalo Bills Super Bowl history, one of the most painful of the 4 consecutive losses was the first one when the Bills were down by a point and had the ability to win the game at a game-ending field goal. And Scott Norwood was the kicker. I think it was 1990. And he went wide right. So forever the words wide right were burned into our memory. And listening to the broadcast, I think it was Tony Romo or Jim Nance, Tony Romo, whoever the combo is, someone was like, wide right, 2 words that no one in Buffalo wants to hear again. And that was it. Wide right. Basically all Kansas City had to do at that point was pick up a first down or 2, and they would be able to kneel it out based off of Buffalo's timeouts remaining. And that was the game. It was a sad one. But again, you never know. If we had made the field goal, it would have been a tie game, and Mahomes could have went down and scored there.
Exactly.
Or it could have been like 2 years ago, the 13 seconds when in under 2 minutes there's like 25 points scored because Allen and Mahomes just go back and forth. But great game. It was a great matchup. I lost my bet with Trey Griggs. So if let's see, this drops on Friday at midnight, Friday morning. If his jersey arrives to me on time, I will be on his podcast at noon on Friday. Yeah. Wearing a Pat Mahomes jersey, and I think it arrived today, Kansas City Chiefs
face
temporary tattoo like sticker logos that will go on my face. So, yeah.
I think I'll be at that Word on the Street Friday if you are.
Yeah, Word on the Street.
I'll hop in.
Yeah, check it out. Word on the Street. And if his jersey does not arrive on time, I will be we're just going to postpone to the following week. So, but it wouldn't be as good if it's got to be like the week after the game, before everyone.
You should have both mailed it to each other prior, so you both had it.
Well, so he wore his jersey like during the game. He took a video of himself during the game, and it's his Super Bowl jersey because they won last year. So he got one that's like an adult size. He's like, hey, it'll at least fit you this time. Instead of the youth large that he sent me, which that's not a joke. Trey had a youth large. But anyway.
Hey, speaking of Bills trivia, the one that I always remembered, because I mean, as an AFC fan, I was always rooting for the Bills against the Cowboys in the 90s. But I remembered, I think his name was Don Beebe. I could have swore his last name was Beebe.
It is Beebe.
He celebrated for the touchdown on like the 15 or 20 yard line and just got crushed before he scored. Was the one for some reason I can just always stick out in my memory.
I don't have the. It sounds familiar. I will tell you that happened to the Bills in modern history. I think I want to say it was like the year that we got LaShawn McCoy, and he was running towards the end zone and like slowed up, celebrating too early, and he got tackled at like the 2-yard line or something like that.
Yep.
I just did a quick Google search and it says Don Beebe chases down Leon Lett. Does that sound right? Leon Lett for a Super Bowl or Super Bowl 27. That might have been it. Yeah, it's a famous. So it would have been him as like a linebacker.
Oh, okay.
Assuming he was he was a wide receiver. What am I missing here? Must have been a turnover.
However, there is a famous play from Super Bowl 27 in 93 that involved Don Beebe celebrating early. Though he wasn't the one who got tackled, here's what happened. The fumble. Dallas Cowboys defensive Leon Lett recovered a fumble close to the Bills' end zone and started running towards the other side of the field, celebrating as if he scored. The chase. Bills wide receiver Don Beebe chased Lett down from behind, stripped the ball out of his hands just before he crossed the goal line. The result, the fumble went out of bounds in the end zone, resulting in a touchback for Buffalo.
Oh, wow.
So it was actually in favor of Buffalo, but I still remember that play.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
It became one of the most iconic moments in Super Bowl history and is often referred to as the Leon Lett fumble or the Beebe strip.
I'm just watching the video. Sorry. That's wild.
Does correct me. It's important to remember Beebe didn't celebrate early. He was the one who saved the touchdown for Buffalo. I had it backwards, but
wild. But hey, that's sports. That's the NFL, and
so
another year. What's that?
So it makes it exciting. You don't know, and you got to watch them to see how they play out.
Yep. I did see in golf there was a 20-year-old kid that won. He was like the youngest player to win the tournament that he won. Does that ring a bell to you?
I haven't seen anything in golf lately.
Let's see if I got it here. Dunlap. So Nick Dunlap, a University of Alabama sophomore, won the American Express Tour Sunday. Won't be able to collect any prize money because of his amateur status. But yeah, he was the 20-year-old golfer, and he won that tournament.
Wow, as an amateur. That's pretty nuts.
And so $1.5 million prize went to the runner-up because he wasn't. Oh, my God. That's wild.
That's awesome.
Hey, he made a name for himself. Youngest amateur to win since 1910. I always pronounce it amateur. Why do people say amateur? You ever hear that?
I've heard both, and I don't know what is correct. I've never actually looked it up to see the grammatical spelling.
Listeners, let us know what you think.
Yeah. Share it in the comments. Is it amateur or amateur?
Yeah, I've always said amateur, like,
Me too.
but who knows? All right, so that's our sports news. This came out in our newsletter yesterday or Tuesday, for those of you listening on Friday. But it was from last week. The FMCSA, the head of the FMCSA, stepping down. There's going to be a new sheriff in town leading the FMCSA. Yeah. And I did like Ken Adamo's brief take on it. Was like, oh, like the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, but literally 94% of your carriers don't have a safety rating because they haven't been rated. Yeah, you're probably not doing something right. You're probably doing something wrong or forgetting to do something there when nearly all of your people that you're in charge of safety for don't have a safety rating. So, but there's a bunch of other stuff involved there too. But yeah, so FMCSA will have a new leader in DC, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter. We sent out a bunch of stuff, market updates on Thursday, big news stuff on Tuesday.
There's a couple I found. One, diesel price is declining. Nearshoring boosts U.S.-Mexico trade. Predictions suggest increase in nearshoring with manufacturing shifting closer to the U.S. So prospecting opportunities, hey, focusing on cross-border transport, I think is going to be a great niche this year for anyone out there looking for things to specialize in. This is interesting. I was just looking at these companies for a client, but Samsara, who is a tracking provider, is suing Motive, another tracking provider, over patent infringement. Lawsuit filed by Samsara against Motive highlights the growing competition and innovation in the transportation tech sector. Both companies offer fleet management and telematics solutions. A lot of AI and automation into TMS, stuff that we're seeing. We're going to be talking about a sponsor soon along that front. U.S. House advances bill to protect moving privacy. Bill aims to regulate data collection and sharing practices in the moving industry. Not for us, household goods, but kind of in our industry. That's pretty much it.
Where are you pulling all that news from?
I just started going into Bard and GPT.
Oh, yeah.
What's new in the transportation industry this week? And it gives me at least a little high level overview.
For anyone out there that I don't want to go down a news rabbit hole, but so FreightWaves is huge. Obviously, they're a great place to go. But in addition, Transport Topics, and if you're a member of TIA, you likely have access to Transport Topics, and they probably send you that like every single week magazine that I get to my house every single week, and I end up recycling it because I just look at their articles online. CDL Life is another good one. Yahoo News surprisingly puts out interesting articles in the transportation space every now and then. And who else? There was I can't think of it. There was a major news outlet that I found on their website had like a freight section that talked all about freight, whether it's import, export, domestic tonnage, legislation and all that stuff. So, but it's really important to stay up to speed on what's going on in our industry because it can change so quickly, and the changes can impact dramatically the way that our job works. So, like, for example, when ELDs went in place, 5 years ago or whatever it was, or it might have been longer at this point, but it was, it created a big capacity crunch, and you get a lot of people trying to figure out, ironically, with our topic today, like, how do I price this freight in the spot market when I don't necessarily know it's changing so rapidly and it's so hard to find a truck. How do I price this not knowing that? So it's probably a good place to segue right into it, right?
For sure.
Like how to price a lane. Like, so we've got some short form content on this. We wanted to be able to have a little bit longer discussion because you can't fit everything into a 8-minute YouTube video or a 2-page vlog. It's just the reality of it. And we could tell stories on here about pricing and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And, when you get into freight brokering, you're not going to have a chance to quote on business until you've built enough relationships with customers where they're going to have enough trust in you to offer it up. But what happens is that first time, if you don't know how to do this, you might lose that shot that you had.
Tired of struggling to find accurate rates and the right carriers for your freight? With DAT1, you can access more than 500 million posted loads and trucks every year. That's 3 times more capacity than any other load board. Plus, their integrated freight management system makes it easy to cover loads 24/7. They have the most trusted network of carriers, brokers, and shippers in the country. You'll get real-time rates on every lane so you know exactly how much a shipment will cost before you commit to it. Plus, you get instant access to top bids from qualified carriers around the country. Get 10% off your first year of DAT1 when you visit the link in the show notes.
You had. So you can play around with pricing and how to understand how it all works before you actually have freight to move. And I would encourage people to do that. So like if you have a DAT account, go into DAT IQ, look at some of the different tools in there so you know what blue means versus what red means. And if you have a license for RateView, which is a really good rating tool from DAT, play around in there. Understand what seasonality has done in the last 52 weeks in certain lanes and understand how to read what the projections are. Understand where that data comes from. We had a really good episode with Tamir from DAT last year where he gave us the analytics on where these data points come from in RateView. But you know, we'll peel back the layers today on some of the rating tools that are out there, maybe some of the internal rating tools that you might have at your company, and good old just talking to drivers. Those are kind of like your big 3 buckets, I would say. Anything you want to lead off with or add in?
I would just add this, right? Like, I think rating has far less to do with the numbers than the situation. And it's funny, like I did a training on this for one of our clients a couple weeks ago, and I went and rewatched it and read the transcript. I think I used an example and talked about numbers for maybe 2 or 3 minutes out of an hour and a half, right? Because the reality is it is just a number. And to be honest, it's always just a guess until you've actually booked that truck, right? So the reality is that it's really far less to do with what number you land on and far more to do with understanding the situation that you're trying to bid on. Yeah. And those are the questions you ask, and those are the understanding of your customer's supply chain, how they operate, and the different variables that go into it. Because you look at any tool, it's going to give you an average, right? Okay, is my situation average? Is it above average? Is it below average? What makes it any of those things, right? Those are the questions. And I think the more important foundational knowledge that teaches you how to do this in every situation, right? Because if you understand the first principles of just how this works, you can apply it to anything, right? As opposed to, let me teach you how to rate LA to Chicago, and then I'll teach you how to rate the next lane the next day, and then the next day, like, once you understand how these things function and what tells you what, you can do it for anything, anywhere, at any time. And to me, that's what we're hoping to be able to provide for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's kind of talk about situational stuff first, right? And I like that you brought that up because I didn't mention it before. When you look at, this is just a recap on the DAT stuff, like, or any rating tool. I don't care if you're using RateView, RateCast, RateMate, whatever these different tools out there are, Impact, if you're a McLeod user, or maybe some third party, right? Or Green Screen. I haven't played around with it too much, but I've heard good things about Green Screen. The reality is it's just data, and it's being displayed in a way that you can see mostly historical averages, right? But an average is just an average. It doesn't mean that because the average yesterday was this, that in my specific situation today, it's going to be right there, right? And there's a lot of data points that go into that. So when you look at, go ahead, Ben.
I want to give an analogy because I've been looking for one. Because Nate, when we were talking with Ken about this, I wanted to do a video where you could see some visual representation that wasn't trucking to try to get people to understand the point you just made, right? What do you start with? What you start with, right, are hopefully enough transactions, right, to get an idea of what happened yesterday, the day before, and at any period up until today, right? What you have no information on is what is going to happen from this point into the future because there's no data on it, right? So it's helpful, but it doesn't tell you everything, right? And the one analogy I think that was really good, and I did use GPT for a lot of suggestions until I found one that I thought made sense, was a farmer's market, right? And think about it like this. So let's say you lived in South Florida, Miami, and you go and buy raspberries for your family every day, right? You buy trucks every day for a freight broker. You're going to go buy them, but you buy them at farmers markets. But let's say there are 5 farmers market around your community and you can go to any one of them. And there are multiple people that sell raspberries at every one of them, right? Well, you would assume that, to your point, what do you start with? What was the average price that raspberries were sold yesterday? Well, a guy that came in and bought $500 worth of raspberries for his restaurant probably paid a lower price than the old lady that bought a little box like this per pound, right? You buy more, you get a discount. You buy less, you pay a little bit more money. There's going to be a difference in those two numbers, right? If you've got a family of 5 or 3 or 12, again, same thing. You buy more, you tend to get a little discount from the guy there. You buy less, you pay a higher price. What DAT or any place that you're going to go look for your average price is just going to show you that every single transaction from almost every one of these farmers markets that were large enough to keep records, right, that sent them, they divide them all out by the number of sales and you get the average. That does not tell you, if you're a restaurant buyer, what you're going to pay tomorrow. And it doesn't tell you, as an older lady that's going to buy one little box of raspberries, what they might pay tomorrow. It'll give you an average of everything that happened, and that might be more or less than what you're going to go try to buy tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you got a holiday and you got to buy a bunch of them, maybe it's a different situation. And to me, it was a pretty good analogy of really what you're looking at to start with versus what you can use this information to determine, I guess.
Yeah. Now, how do you relate that to freight, right?
Yep.
Your analogy was great, though, with the farmer's market and the raspberries. So think about this with your customer. We're going to look at the customer side and the truck side, because this is what the spot market is, right? We're not talking about a contracted lane going to a contracted carrier where it's predictive and it's all the same. We're talking about, hey, here's an unexpected load. We need to get it covered. Well, there's a couple of things that are going to factor in here. Let's talk about the customer, the shipper first. Pricing. Are they going to be as price sensitive as they normally are? Well, it depends. Is this time sensitive? Is there a massive opportunity cost if this load is not delivered immediately? Does this load, can it sit there for, regular carrier fell out, but hey, it can sit here for, up to 2 weeks, right? Those all impact it. The more urgent it is, the more flexible they're going to be with spending more money to secure a truck. If it can sit there for a while, they're probably going to be a little bit more price sensitive. So those are a couple of things to look at.
Good question, right? And I want to reframe this for the audience. If you had to ship something and you had 5 days to move it, are you going to pay a high rate today if you can probably ship it cheaper tomorrow? Probably not. And again, if you got 4 or 5 days to wait for the right truck to give you the rate you want, then you would wait. If you can't wait, meaning if this load doesn't pick up today, my customer is going to tell me they'll never buy my product from me ever again, then guess what? I got to pay whatever it costs to move that today, right? Those are your two extreme examples, right?
Exactly. Now that kind of the same concepts apply on the carrier side. Are you getting them a load in a city where there's, 10 trucks for every one available load, where they're trying to get their hands on anything? Or are they, so that's called loose capacity, right? Very loose capacity. There's an excess of trucks. Or is it tight capacity, meaning that, hey, there are only 5 of us trucks available here, and there's 30 of you trying to get a truck today. So there's 6 times more freight than there is trucks available. That's called tight capacity. So when capacity is loose, you can typically get a truck for less. Capacity is tight, it costs you more. That is basic supply and demand right there at a micro level in a geographical market.
Right. And here's back to the other example. The carriers are the one that are going to perform the work or buying the thing from you, right? In the farmer's market, they're the ones shopping for raspberries. The broker is the one selling the raspberries, right, in the farmer's market. So guess what? If I sell raspberries and there's only one person to buy it that day, right, I got to kind of offer my fruit to whatever they're willing to pay, or sell nothing. Those are my 2 choices, right?
Yep.
If there are 1,000 people in line to buy raspberries, I can probably charge a little more than I did yesterday because everybody wants what I have, and maybe I'm the only one selling it. Now I have the leverage to your point, and that means that it's a very loose market. Lots of people want what I have, and I don't have enough of it for everybody.
So I want to go a step further too. Now, outside of the capacity being tight or loose or neutral in any given market, think about where you're sending this driver. Are you sending maybe they live and spent their whole life growing up in the South, and you're trying to send them up to New England in the middle of winter?
How about Buffalo last Friday?
Exactly. Yeah. Buffalo, New York, last Friday. We had, I mean, it's above freezing now, but we got upwards of 6 feet total in certain areas around here that all fell across 2 storms within a week. Tractor travel ban, tractor trailer ban. Yeah, I mean, and when there wasn't a ban, you still didn't have a lot of trucks that wanted to drive through because the conditions were bad. But that's a great example. You're going to have to entice somebody to get there. But let's say on the flip side, you talk to a driver who is from Buffalo and is trying to get a load back because he's trying to be there for the Bills game that they lost, right? He's like, I'm going to Buffalo one way or another, whether it's a football game or a kid's birthday or fill in the blank holiday. Somebody wants to get home. They're going to drive home no matter what. They might as well take a load, and they'll take it on the cheap to make sure that they're getting something instead of deadheading and driving empty. So there's, different scenarios there. Or let's say you're sending them to a location that doesn't have a lot of freight that comes out of it. So let's say you send them from Buffalo to Boca Raton, Florida, and it's not citrus shipping season. And they're going to have to drive up to Georgia to get their next load. Those are all things that impact it. So situation depends or impacts more than price. Now, price does matter, though.
For sure.
And if you're looking at the everyday average, like let's say middle of summer, dry van, going from one hot market to another hot market, no holidays, no storms. So we're taking all that weird stuff off the table. Okay. Then, and really only then, can you look at numbers alone. But in most situations, there's going to be some subjective situation that's going to impact the rate, either up or down from what you see on a rating tool. So we'll start with DAT, right? We talked a little bit about it. Rate View, and they've got Rate Cast to give future predictions. What I'd recommend here is there's like so much that goes into it because you're going to look in there, you're going to see a median price, and then you're going to see amount above and amount below, and it's going to capture basically the 25th to the 75th percentile. So what does that mean? Out of all their data, the top quarter and the bottom quarter they toss out, and they're leaving that middle 50% and giving you the data. So they're giving you the upper threshold, the lower threshold, and then the median, which is like the average number that you see right away.
So, I want to give an example. I have one right here pulled up for us. So this was one I was looking for a produce customer in California, and they moved their operations to Arizona in the winter and then back to California, right? So this one is Yuma, Arizona to Los Angeles. It's 280 miles, right? And you can see right now.
I'm going to pull it up too.
Yep. So in the past 7 days, the median is 958 with a high of 1142 and a low of 784.
Right? It's a wide range.
Wide range. And here's the other thing. It's excluding, as Nate said, 25 on either end and on both ends, which means that the real peak probably paid was probably close to 14 or 1500 for that load, and probably as cheap as $500. That is not going to show up here. And why do they exclude those for all the listeners out there and all of the, I can't remember his name, but I would have name dropped him right now at that association for whatever it was called.
Oh,
anyway. As to why rates aren't reported and why everybody thinks it's this massive conspiracy of my numbers don't look like DATs and everybody's trying to whatever, right? Here's why they're not on there. Because they're not the average load. They're not a 42,000 pound dry van, right? These are for reefers, but it's not a 42,000 pound load of average commodity with average pickup and delivery times, right? It's not average. So it doesn't help anybody to determine what they might be paying for an average load. It doesn't help anybody out there to go, oh, wow, Jimmy paid Jake $500 to run a load off market because he needed to get home for his birthday party, or was willing to run this cheap because his next load he needed to pick up got him right there, or whatever it was that made sense for that one truck to run that load for that cheap with that broker. Maybe they did a favor. Maybe he took a loss a few weeks ago and he's making up for it. There are 1,000 different reasons why somebody runs it for below market. But guess what? If you saw $500 on here, what do you think everyone's going to try to do? Pay as low as they can. That doesn't help anybody figure out what they are likely to pay. That's the point of the tool. It doesn't help you to see the extreme examples of every situation unless that's the only type of work you move in. And I'll give you the other extreme. Super heavy, overweight, permits, take forever to load, floor loading, by appointment, multi-drop, but still the same lane, you're probably at $1,500 or $1,600. Again, if they include that rate, you looking at an average normal load that makes up, again, here's the statistics, 50 to 60% of all of the loads shipped on that lane, that data doesn't help anybody. That's why it's excluded. And it just makes it harder for everybody to see what's actually happening. You need a narrower range. Think
Blue
about
Book Services is the resource you need if you're transporting fresh produce or lumber. Their online databases contain thousands of companies throughout the produce and lumber industry supply chains. You can easily search their databases to generate new sales leads. Blue Book's credit ratings help you avoid companies with high credit risk, and their team can help resolve disputed loads. To learn more, go to producebluebook.com or lumberbluebook.com and click Join
narrower
today.
range. Think about if you had to quote your customer and your ranges were $1,000 apart. How valuable is that tool to you? If you got to quote your customer and they go, could be 800, could be 2,000. Okay, great. But my customer needs a range of at least $100 or $200. So where am I going to fall? That's why you see tighter ranges and they exclude the extreme examples, and why smaller carriers' numbers don't often report. They don't run enough loads on one lane sometimes. Or if they only run that lane, they aren't an example of a spot load. They're a contract carrier. And again, the variables and why they're willing to run that load for that rate aren't applicable to your situation.
I had to go back and do my homework on the Twitter feud, but it's this James Lamb and the Small Business in Transportation Coalition who you were referencing. But it's good. But it's not just him or that organization. There's people, keyboard warriors that will type stuff trying to say who sets rates and it's all rigged. And you just outlined situations where that's where the rate comes from. That's what leads to that situation.
And furthermore, it's in nobody's benefit to create a tool that doesn't give you accurate information. Why? Because as an industry, you're going to go do the thing yourself anyway. And if you keep paying different rates than what the tool tells you, you're going to stop using the tool. It's not even in their best interest to do that. They would lose customers. It doesn't even make business sense for anybody to do something like that.
Yep. So like so for the spot rate, the benefit to looking at a rating tool like RateView is it gives you a starting point.
Yep.
Okay. It's a much more effective tool, in my opinion, for doing a bid because you have a lot more lead time when you're going to book a truck for a situation like that. Spot, if it's got to go like today, tomorrow, it gives you a starting point, but there's nothing. And you can use internal data from your TMS, right? Look at what did we pay for this lane recently or a year ago at this time. Oh, which carrier ran it? Let me call them and see if they're interested again. Or if you're talking, maybe you get the load posted or you start making outbound calls to carriers. If you can talk to an actual dispatcher or a driver, that is going to be way more accurate and current than any rating tool that's online or historically in your TMS. Why? Because that is someone telling you right now how much they are willing to take that load for or run that load for. That supersedes every other piece of data.
Exactly. Back to the farmer's market. It's like calling your friends and asking them what they paid yesterday, and then calling the farmer's market today and going, here's how much I need to buy. What would you charge me if I showed up now? That's your difference, right? Yeah, it might be close to yesterday, but it might not be. And that's the thing that changes so much in our industry is things do change day to day, and they can change drastically.
So I want to talk. I'm going to preface with this: people can smell desperation, whether it's a customer or a carrier. So, if a carrier can sense that you're desperate, either because of the tone of your voice or you just tell them, you can expect to be paying a premium to them, right? And maybe you have to because they're the only truck available.
Yep.
And you want to make sure that you lock them down, and that's fine. But when you start to go out and source this stuff, don't forget that there's things important to that carrier. And Ben, can you talk through some of the stuff? Because you've done a great job of this in the past, is explaining the questions that you would like to ask a driver that can kind of reveal to you what's important to them.
Yes.
Right. Like you kind of separate yourself from, or hey, so where does your driver want to go? Like stuff like that. Right.
Here's mine. And it's funny, like I can't write it down. I've just done it so many times. And this is what we talk about, right? Whether it's prospecting, negotiating with carriers, right? Where you get good at this is just doing it a lot, right? So if you're new, realize it's going to take some time and practice until you get better at it. Like I wasn't good at it when I started. Do it thousands of times a month for years and you get better at it, right? But the first thing is who speaks first. And why does that matter in a truck negotiation with a carrier, right? Because the person that speaks first gives information to the other side that they don't have. Like if you and I are going to start and I go, hey, so you're the carrier, Nate, and we're going to go with this lane, Yuma to LA. And I call you. Normally there's like kind of a standoff where like, I'll be like, hey, someone will be like, hey, I'm calling on your truck that's posted in Yuma. What do you need to go to LA? And then the carrier goes, well, what are you paying? And you go, well, what do you need to run it? And they go, well, tell me what you got in it. And you're like, well, how much do you need? It's your truck. And they argue over who's going to speak first, right? That's a typical situation with somebody that is trying to get the upper hand. But again, when you do that, it pushes each of you farther apart and it creates confrontation, which makes it harder to get to the point you both need to, which is it needs to work for both of you. And in every negotiation, both should be a little unhappy. You should get a little and I should get a little, right? So what I try to do is ask the questions that are the leverage in the negotiation, right? So what are your leverage? If I say, hey, your truck's posted in Yuma and I need a rate to LA, most of the time a carrier goes, well, my guy doesn't really want to go to Cali, but what are you paying? Why do you think he says that?
Because he's immediately trying to take the defense of like, he's trying to take it out of your hand, right? Whereas if you were to flip it around and say, hey, where's your driver looking to go? He's trying to get to Southern California. Oh, that's perfect.
Yep.
I've got a load going to LA.
Here's your next one. Next one is call it the complexity or the weight of the load, right? It's either going to be hard on the truck and burn gas if it's super heavy, or maybe it takes a long time to load. That is clearly a negative when selling a load to a truck. They want lighter loads that they can load quick to go make more money, right? So if you've got a very heavy load, that one's going to be, I know he's got leverage on me there. He's going to want more money to run a heavier load. It makes perfect sense. So you got direction, you got the complexity or weight of the load, and then usually your appointments versus, open first come, first serve, or kind of your last ones as to negotiating your big buckets to negotiate, your leverage, right? So the questions and the way I try to frame it is I'm not calling about one load first off. I'm calling about many loads because now I can take that one out of your hands. So for instance, hey, Nate, I see you got some trucks posted up in Houston. Those guys still open and available? My first question. Yeah, they're still there. Hey, my next question. When are they looking to be empty? And why do you think I ask that question before I tell them when my load needs to pick up? It's the same reason.
Yeah, I mean, I would go a step further. It could also be have to do with their hours.
Yes. Hours of service. And also anybody that's brokered more than a couple dozen loads realizes you've booked trucks before where the dispatcher thought the guy was going to get empty in an hour and a half, got stuck there for 3 hours, and it's no fault of the driver or the dispatcher. And they go, yeah, he should be fine to pick up in 3 hours, but he's still there and you booked a truck that can't even pick up the load that you needed to pick up this afternoon. So my next questions are, when is he going to be empty? Where is he? And is he fresh on hours? Right. So again, these are very honest questions you can ask any carrier that they're really going to tell you, yeah, this guy's fresh. He's at his delivery. He should be done in an hour or two. My next question usually, has he delivered there before, or is this his first time? Because the dispatcher might be assuming it takes an hour and a half to unload, but he's never delivered there before. And maybe this place is not very efficient and it takes him 4 hours. So those are my ways to prevent problems that have bit me in the ass later. Those are my first couple questions. And then right after that, to your point, I'm going to go, hey, I can see you guys are based out of, because you can see where the carrier's MC's out of. I pull that up and I'm like, hey, you guys are based out of LA. Out of curiosity, is your guy looking to get back home for the weekend, or is there anywhere he's hoping to get to bounce out of Arizona? To your point, the dispatcher is going to usually say, well, where is your load going? Where do you need him to go? And I'm going to say, hey, I've got a couple loads I can use this guy for. Couple going to the east and a couple going out west. Does your driver have a preference? And now I'm usually going to get one of two answers. Either yes, and where he has a preference, or he doesn't have a preference and his preference is the highest paying load. Okay, either or, I got my answer of what is important to this guy. If he wants to go home, now I'm going to be like, well, hey, look, I think I got a load going to LA. My customer mentioned it earlier. I got to confirm it, but would LA work for that guy? Yeah, to be honest, like I said, he needs to go home. Well, let me ask you, what's he looking to make on his way home? Well, what's your load plan? Well, I got to call my customer to make sure it's still available, but usually it's around, and now I got my number in. And for this one, I might be like, hey, usually my customer's right around average. He'll pay about $950. Does that work for your guy? Yeah, I mean, I think if you can get $950, that works. Okay, well, maybe I'm there. Maybe he's like, no, I need to be at $1,050. I might go, okay, well, hey, I only got $950 into this. Is this load? And I go through the rest of the details. If he's fresh on hours and he's going to be empty in time, and can he make my spot load pickup and delivery, and I know it fits for him, hey, I'll go back to my customer for you, Mr. Dispatcher, and ask for the extra $100 now that I know everything I needed to line up is good and this is a good fit. I'll see what I can do. Great. Hold on. Call my customer. Maybe I get the money. Maybe I don't. If I don't, I'm going to come back to them and go, tell them the truth. Look, hey, I try to get $1,050. I'm willing to take it in the chin and I'll run it for break even to give you an extra 50 or $75. That's all margin I got in it. It's only a 10% margin load. I'll give you the, maybe $975 or $1,000, and maybe I only make $25 on it. But hey, I think this load works for you and my customer really needs it. And I don't want to go through the headache of trying to risk not getting a truck for my customer's need. Right. And that
I want to add in too. So you can, so this is, DAT has this. If you're doing a truck search, like you're outlining this scenario, it tells you where in the company, it tells you where they're located.
Yep.
So, and further, if you have access to highway, you can not only say, I know you guys are based in fill in the blank city, but hey, you guys run this lane a lot. You can see their inspection history on a map. Right. So they run that lane quite often, or they get inspected a lot in this city or in the vicinity of the city. So that it's a desirable location for them, whether they might be located there. They might have a bunch of contracted business so that they run out of that city every single week, but they got to find spot loads to get themselves there empty. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of tools and data out there, and like this stuff is only going to be getting better and better for us to make this a way more efficient supply chain.
Well, that's the last thing, right? The last thing I do for a spot load is RateView gives me historical. The record of everything that has happened tells me nothing about the market today. If I want to know what I got to pay for a truck in the next 3 hours to pick up, I care first, how many trucks are actually in that market? If I'm trying to find a truck in Sparks, Nevada, or the middle of nowhere, there's probably not that many of them, which means I've got to pay whatever it costs. If there's only 5 trucks that can pick up my load in my terms, or that pickup window, I got to go through all of them and just get the best rate and then take it to my customer. If I'm trying to cover LA to Chicago, there might be 200 posted trucks that could work for that lane. Well, now the averages mean way more when there's plenty of trucks there. When there's a small number of trucks in the market your load is loading out of, the averages mean far less because any one of those 5 trucks can go, I don't want to go to California. And then every one of them might tell you, I won't go to California. Then you might got to call all 5 of those back and go, what would it cost to get you to California? And they might say, well, rate's normally 1,050. I need 2,200. And you know what? That might be the cheapest you can find a truck that will pick up that load and meet your customer's needs. And in that scenario, this is what most brokers don't do. They just call their customer and they go, nobody will work. But that's not true. Like, good brokers will call their customer and tell them the thing other brokers are scared to tell them. There is a truck there. Yes, it's not a great rate. No, I wouldn't pay it if I didn't have to. But you told me your customer is going to be so angry with you that if you don't get this load there, they might not buy anything off you all year. If that's me, I pay the guy the $2,200, get the load picked up and get it done. And oftentimes your customer will pay that. Just because they posture and tell you all day long they want to pay $2 a mile, they won't pay any more of it. That is negotiation. When you can get your customer in a conversation to what I call like the fork in the road, and you make them make that call, you will be astonished at what they will spend when they need to. Because if you know all those things, and I ask you point blank, hey, Nate, I got you on the phone. I have another carrier on hold right now. He can be at your facility in 35 minutes, meets all your insurance requirements, and can get your load to your customer. I know you wanted to be at 1,100. This guy's 2,200. I'm letting you make the choice. Do you want me to cut him or send him? And you say nothing. And you will be astonished that just being silent, they'll be like, you know what? Send him. I don't want to deal with the headache. Now you know where your customer's really willing to go in these scenarios. And this is how you really learn how to price your customers and where there's opportunity and where there isn't, right? Because not all freight's created equal. That load was worth more to them to get it moved in that time. And maybe they were willing to. Maybe they weren't, right? And maybe some of that wasn't true. But that's your only way to determine where are they really willing to put their money or their ass on the line. Their ass is going on the line either way. Are they going to willing to pay to buy themselves out of it or deal with the repercussions tomorrow, right? It's our job to make them make that choice on behalf of the carrier.
So in summary, it's important to note here that we spent very, very little time talking about numbers, right? Just to kind of echo what you had prefaced with much earlier in this segment. Because the spot market, the reality is there is a lot of subjectiveness on both ends, right? And I mean, you could even include the brokerage. It could be that you're going to be flexible because you're trying to save a relationship with the customer, right? Maybe you owe one to them, something like that. But either way, that plays a big role in all this stuff. So, the pricing gives you a starting place so that if somebody is 4X, requesting 4X, whatever the going rate is, and it's not a tight market, you know that you're not even in the same ballpark. Someone's got wrong information. But yeah, have conversations, talk human to human, figure out what's really going on and what's important to everybody. It's like playing a game of poker.
Right. And here's the last thing, right? The other extreme to this is if you're working on a bid for a customer, right? I want to take as much market risk out of that bid as humanly possible, right? Again, you can use the averages. And if you're doing a large bid, you have to use things and tools like this. But if I got a customer that's got like 8 lanes and they're like, hey, can you bid these out for me? What I'm going to do is call carriers, to your point, email them and speak to them individually and go, hey, do any of these lanes work with your other customers? Would any of them be of interest to you? If I can get you this load every week, what would be a rate you'd be willing to give to me to run this load every week? That number is going to almost always be different than your averages or your spot markets. And not only is it going to be different as a number, it's going to hold up better because that situation for that load fits that carrier. It might not fit the next 12 carriers you talk to or 20 or 40.
Yeah, it's a great point.
One works for you because that load fits with their other customers and where their drivers need to be every week. So now all of that risk of the market doesn't matter to me because I know that ABC Trucking likes this lane because it fits for them and they're willing to do it for this number. So now I can put 12 or 15% on that for spending the time, not to talk to the one driver, by the way, it's to talk to the 70 that didn't work, right? And that's the thing that carriers lose sight of when they go, I'm just going to take my broker's margin by opening a brokerage. Great. You've got to talk to 70 other carriers for the lanes that don't work for your asset company. Are you going to do that? That's what we get paid for. And that's the thing that gets lost when everybody yells about margin, is that it's the time and effort that it takes to talk to everybody that doesn't work. That's what you got to pay for, to find the one that does work. And that's why we get the benefit throughout the year, because we spent a whole bunch of time working on something we didn't know we were going to get paid on. And the likelihood is you spend more time calling carriers that don't work than ever do. That's why you got to get paid for the ones that do work. It's not just because you had the right truck at the right point in time on the right moment that you get that margin. Yeah, that'll happen periodically, but you can't build a business around that. You can't build recurring revenue. You can't build anything on it. It's just luck. It's happenstance, right?
That's exactly right. Good stuff, man. Great discussion today. I think that kind of puts a bow on it. If you guys have any specific questions or scenarios you want us to run through, email us. We can always try to line you up in the Q&A session that comes out on Tuesdays. And also, we're always open to topic suggestions. If you guys have a specific topic you want us to cover that we haven't done in a while, we'll consider it. Share it with the friends. Send us a message, leave us a review, comment on the YouTube channel. Ben, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I pulled up a quote because I haven't found anything new in a while. And this one I thought was really good. It says, in this life, there are no do-overs. What if you treated each day like it was your last? What would you do differently? What would you be grateful for? What would be important to you? How mindful would you be? What would your interactions with others be like? How meaningful would your day be? And how would you spend your time and energy is one of the most important decisions you get to make in life. And you get to make it every day, right? And again, I don't think people think about this much, but I think when you try to change the perspective, it changes the effort and how you approach things. Because we're all human, and every day we got to get up and sometimes do the same things day in and day out. And it gets monotonous and it's not that exciting, and you don't want to put all of your energy into it because it just gets old sometimes, right? But I love the reframing of that quote, because I do that often with myself, is to think about, like, what if this is the last week or the last day that I'm going to do this, right? What would I do? Because what's really going to differentiate you as a freight broker or a freight brokerage or a freight agent is you've got to add more value to your customers than your competitors. Full stop. You're never going to be able to do that if you don't give a shit. And if you don't care enough, you're never going to be able to get there. That precedes everything else we ever talk about on this show, right? Is just caring enough about what you're doing that your customer is getting more working with you than other people. And if you can sometimes just keep it that simple, you're going to get far further than you will worrying about every minuscule detail and what you're doing here and there. Just putting your best foot forward, to me, is some of the best advice that we all kind of forget on a day-to-day basis.
Enlightening. That's good. Now that echoes pretty good. I a lot of times I hear people ask, like, do you think I should get into freight brokerage? And I'll often ask them, like, do you enjoy doing, this? And they're like, well, I've never really done cold calling before. I've never really done a sales job. I'm like, well, it's heavily intensive on that. And if you've never done it before and you don't know if you like it or don't like it, I probably wouldn't hop into it without having tried something that's going to echo at that. Because if you don't enjoy doing parts of your job, you're going to be miserable and eventually resentful of the industry. That every single person I've met in this industry that is long-term successful truly enjoys it. Is passionate about it. And they don't just have a transactional relationship with their customers. It's a real like deep threaded, like long-lasting relationship. You're basically friends. You're basically friends with these people that we do business with because you care about them and you're making their life. You're gonna care about them more than, like you mentioned, the other 10 folks out there that don't. For sure.
I mean, I case in point, one of my first customers, a younger guy, had something horrible happen recently, passed away early, was only like in his late 50s. I haven't done business with them since 2019, and I got invited to their funeral because that's how well I knew them and their families, right? And again, I can name at least a dozen customer relationships I have that are similar to that, because you really do become like coworkers with these people, your customers. You know them because you go to work with them every day. Maybe not in the same location for the same company and the same name on the paycheck, but you guys have each other's back in a way that, again, I've never been in the military, but I got to assume that it creates a bond that is different than where you're going to get in a day-to-day, relationship. So for sure, you got to care about it. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
For sure. Well, good stuff. Make sure to check us out on the next episode of Freight 360 and on the Final Mile, which comes out on Tuesdays. Ben?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, or should I say next season, go Bills. That wraps up this episode of Freight 360. Check out the show notes for links to anything that we've referenced on this episode. And make sure to visit us online at freight360.net to see our entire library of episodes, videos, blogs, and more.
And make sure to check us out on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel for daily and weekly tips and content. And if you'd like your question answered on the show, fill out the Contact Us form on our site, and we'll see you next week.